My name's Andy Leonard, and I'm very honored to be here talking to you today about Azure DevOps and the SSIS development lifecycle. I already asked a bunch of you earlier, and most of you are using SSIS. A bunch of you are using the SSIS catalog. Anybody doing SSIS in Azure Data Factory? Curious. Okay, a couple people. It's kind of new. Lots of new functionality there. So first, we're going to start off with the obligatory slides. If you have a cell phone, please put it on self-destruct and make for the door if it rings. If you are not familiar with PASS, PASS.org is where you can go and learn about all of these things. It's a cool organization. Not perfect, but cool. And they do some really interesting stuff. The virtual groups, the local groups, SQL Saturdays, just a lot of stuff. And you can learn about the things on this slide and more if you go to pass.org or sequelpass.org. My name's Andy, as I mentioned earlier, and my title, I change it like every week. This week it's Chief Data Engineer at Enterprise Data and Analytics, or EDNA. That's why it says EDNA here. I'm also co-host of a podcast on data science, AI, and machine learning. It's called Data Driven. And all week I've been doing these little shows from the summit, little snippet behind the scene type shows, interviewing people. And the entire week I've been mispronouncing Synapse and ARC. I got ARC right, but Synapse I was calling Synergy, so forgive me. But you can learn more about that at datadriven.tv. Also on Facebook, you can actually watch the videos. Frank usually does the editing. Excuse me. And he edits down all of the mistakes that I made. If you want to know more about me, there'll be a link at the end, and you can go check that out. I'm not that important. We can move on. I don't like the idea of what I call a naked scaler. If somebody tells you 68% of these people think that, they're selling something, and I'm not a particularly good salesperson, so I don't like them. I like more information. More data is better, and I like this a lot. And this is how I think this is going to go. We got a little bit of 10, level 100 here, 20% of that, some 200, 300, and then some 400 stuff. Now, some of you are going to look at this and go, Andy, that was all 500. And to you, you're welcome. Some of you are going to look at this and go, Andy, nothing touched 200. And to you, I'm sorry. But this is how I feel this is. And just, be flexible because we're all learning, right? I'm learning. I learned stuff like 20 minutes ago down in Donald Farmer's talk. I'm going to ask you to hold your questions to the end, not because I don't want to answer your questions. This is the first time I'm delivering this, and I just don't know how it's going to go time-wise. And I may answer your question in the next demo. I have 3 or 4 progressive demos, depending on time. I will be here outside the room after we finish, and I will answer your questions, I promise. I made a note about the slides. If you downloaded the slides earlier, they've changed, and you'll see that. And if that bothers you, you can catch me outside the room, punch me in the face. Don't ever do that again. It's fine. I'm going to do it again. Some of the screenshots are outdated because Azure's changed, as we just saw a minute ago. There's now 6 bubbles on the home screen, not 5. And I can't overemphasize this. There are many other ways to accomplish what I'm going to show you. So if you want to tell me all about how you do it better, that's good. I'd love to learn from you, and we can do that outside. My agenda for today is that introduction, which is done already. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of how I got here, tell you a little bit of my story, and some about how Azure DevOps got here. We're going to talk about agents and pipelines, and there may be more. Okay, so a brief history about CI/CD, and then some source control by example. But by way of my story, I presented at my very first PASS Summit in Denver in 2007, 12 years ago. And I talked about Team Foundation Server. And I was talking about it using SSIS. This was my architecture slide. I brought 2 laptops and a router to the summit. And because I didn't have enough power to run everything and do the presentation all on the same box. This was back in the old days when we used to carve our own chips out of wood. And so I did the best I could. I'm an engineer, and I kind of solved this problem. And you can see that slide is just awesome, right? Different fonts and everything. That's a true slide right there. I'm telling you, I've come a long way since then. Now I use both colors in PowerPoint, black and white, just so you know if you haven't picked up. CI/CD, the CI part stands for continuous integration, and it's really about storing and merging software frequently. Continuous delivery is deploying software frequently. Now, if you looked at both those definitions and you said, Andy, you said frequently a couple of times, what do you mean by that? It depends. And what it depends on is how your organization operates. How can you, what frequency can you tolerate? What does your business need? And I can guarantee you this, that if you start practicing CI/CD in your organization, a couple of things about that. First, the hardest part has nothing to do with technology and everything to do with culture and how you think about delivering value to your customers. The second thing is frequently it's going to change for you. When you start, it's going to be slower than where you end up. I promise you. Why do I talk about this in the context of SSIS? Because SSIS is software development. It shares in its name, SQL Server Integration Services, it shares a name with a popular relational database engine. It's not database. This is software. So you want to treat it like software. You want to do software development best practices. So just kind of walking through this. I've got some demos in here that we're going to do. Like I said, it's going to be about 3 or 4. But in between that, and this is really the first time I've done a presentation with this many slides. And the reason there's so many slides in here is I'm walking you through what this looked like last week if you were to build these things. So I'm showing you screenshots for every step I could think of about how to configure this and get it going. Who's using Azure DevOps? All right, a handful. So or maybe half. Maybe I'm exaggerating. So I did really good. This is what I thought. Who has never seen Azure DevOps? Don't be shy. All right, you're going to see it today. So what I want is for you people who are experienced with this, y'all just chill out, think about families or, daisies blowing in the wind, something else for a few minutes while I help the other folks catch up to where you are, just a little. So if you go to dev.azure.com, and you can see that's where I am. My company's Enterprise Data and Analytics. Our domain is entdna.com. See how I worked that in? If you get to presenting and be a consultant, you'll figure that out. And I've got sample code out there. And you can get the sample code that we're going to use. And there's other samples out there too. You can get to them in an SSIS samples project, Azure DevOps project, if you go to entdna.com/get SSIS samples. I don't know how much of this it'll show you. It may actually show you the pipelines because I built the pipelines that we're going to use inside of this code here. So for demonstration purposes, I'm actually using some of these. I blog about it at andyleonard.blog, and you can get that. You can sign up here for free. There's always some kind of deal going on at azure.com when you sign up. And Azure DevOps is different, but you can start here for free and kind of build from that. I apologize. I'm trying not to cough. You geeks have given me a cold. You should be ashamed. When you start, you're going to want, after you set up your Azure DevOps piece, you can create a project. And this used to be free. I don't want to say it is for sure, but it used to be free. And I think if you do like your own project, you want to set up your own thing, you can still do this for free and have something like 3 or 4 collaborators for free that work with. Is it 5? Okay. Thank you. So yeah, you can share with friends. If you want to do like an open source project and run it over on GitHub, you can do that. They've got some free stuff you can do there, but you've got something similar here. You've always had, it's always been 5, I believe. You can have 5 people work with you on it. So you create a new project, as you can see there. I'm going to try my Zoom. No, that was not the Zoom it thing. Let's try come on. It ain't going to work. No, wait, it is working. I'm looking at the wrong thing. There we go. It's not working on my screen. But you click New Project, and this is the Create New Project screen. You can choose whether it's public or private. I made this one public, because you're actually seeing the SSIS samples creation here. You'll notice down here at the bottom, let me see if I can get zoomed in on that. It's hard to see over there. Maybe you can't see that very well, but it's Team Foundation Server. Now, when Liz and Srija and I did our talk on Wednesday, they've set their stuff up using Git, and you can do that. The reason I chose TFS is a lot of clients call us to come help them with stuff like this. And they don't realize, they think in order to move from TFS, Team Foundation Server, on premises into Azure DevOps into cloud, that they've got to go do Git. And you can if you want to. You can certainly make that transition, but you don't have to. So you can continue to use the process you're familiar with. If you're running Team Foundation Server on premises, you can run that same thing in the cloud now in Azure DevOps. And I really wanted to make that point. I like that option. I'm an engineer. I love options. So really like that they did that for us. Once you're done, the project is created, and this is what mine looks like. It says, SSIS samples there. So one of the reasons that I mentioned this, I kind of going to repeat myself a little bit here, but, people say everybody's using, Git to do this. And it's like, well, no, not everybody. There's some really large corporations that have a lot invested in TFS. And I really want to show them that, you can pick this up. You can pick up what you've got, edit workspaces, change source control, and bam, you're in Azure DevOps in fairly short order. All right, so once you've got your source control or your version control, Azure DevOps set up, your project created, the next step is you want to connect Visual Studio to that project. So in these next few screenshots here, I'll show you how to do that. You start in Visual Studio and you go to Tools, and at the bottom of Tools, there's Options. Let me see if I can hit that. Yeah, there we go, Options. And once you open Options, one of them is Source Control, and I'm all over the place here. But yeah, Source Control, and then you can pick Team Foundation Server or Git from there natively. This is 2017. The reason I'm not doing Visual Studio 2019 is last week when I looked, I didn't think it was ready. SSIS Integration Services was not ready. And it is a completely different setup, by the way. Now, the Integration Services extension is now in the marketplace. So you don't go get SSDT and download it and install it anymore. You go to the marketplace and pull that extension down, and you can get it by itself. You could do that before, but it's different. Just be aware of that. After you've picked Team Foundation Server, if you're going to use Team Foundation Server, if you pick Git, you can come here to Team as well and manage these connections. And just walking through this with the Team Explorer window will display. There is a Manage Connections option on here. When you click that, you want to sign in. I didn't show you the sign in here. And then you can pick the project you've created in Azure DevOps. So you see what we're doing is we've got this thing in the cloud. It's going to do our source control. Now we're going to do our development. And what we're configuring is our development environment. So we connect this together, and once we've got that connected, we can see that. And it'll look just like you see here. It'll show you the URL. Gosh, that's really hard. It'll show you the URL, and then you've got these little tiles beneath there: My Work, Source Control Explorer, Builds, Pending Changes, Work Items, and Settings. We're not going to exhaust all of those. We're just going to show you kind of how to use these, what you need to do to get pipelines running for SSIS Lifecycle Management. So again, one of those projects I've got, and you can go pull a copy down, is called Test SSIS Solution. I named it that because I was feeling really creative that day. And there's a couple, 3 packages in there. The one that I like to point out is Report and Fail. And what Report and Fail does is it writes a message saying, I am this package into the log, and then it fails with a pretty I think it's actually a specific message that says this is a custom error message or something like that. Report and Succeed does the opposite. Well, it writes a message, I am this package, and then it succeeds. And then Write a Record and Succeed is something that we're going to use in here, these 3 packages. And they're very dumb little packages. But this is I'm not testing SSIS data warehouse loads here. I'm testing functionality. How's this going to respond when it fails? And trust me on this, you need to know. You need to know how your code's going to work when it fails. You want it to fail elegantly. You want it to fail safe. This is part of engineering. So we're going to be using that Write a Record and Succeed, and I'll show you that package when we get to it. Once I've got that project open in my environment, I want to add it to source control, and you can see I just right-click in Solution Explorer in Visual Studio 2017 and add solution to source control will do that for me. And once it is added, it looks, first it takes me to Team Explorer, and it says, where do you want to put this? I want to leave it in a solution, I want to create a folder under SSIS samples called Test SSIS Solution. Now, you can create all kinds of folder structures under here if you'd like. You can change the name of the solution if you'd like. I want you to look at me very carefully. Look into my eyes. Do not change the name of the solution in source control. Okay, don't do that, because I don't like to think negative. I don't like to say what happens if you get hit by a truck, okay, or fired or something tragic. I like to think what happens if you win the lottery, right? I love what I do, and I know me. I'd keep doing this. But I live 2 miles from Briary Creek Lake, and that lake is filled with largemouth bass that all need catching. I'm just telling you. And I'd go catch them if I win the lottery. Probably help if I played. You want to maintain consistency between these things, and it's manual, and you could type in that box and change it. Don't type in that box and change it. Give everybody a fighting chance. Somebody's going to come in there after you. Maybe it might be you in a couple of years looking for this version of the code. Give future you a fighting chance at finding this. You'll thank you. I absolutely promise you. All right. So once it's stored in there, you get these little plus marks. They're kind of hard to see, but if you see down by the packages there, they're those little green check plus bars there. They're letting you know that, okay, it's been kind of staged. It's ready. It's actually saved up there, but you haven't yet told it, go ahead and check this code in. This is a good process, and Git has a similar process where it's staged locally, and then when you check it in, it goes into the repository. I think it's a push when you do it that way. But it's already there, and those little plus symbols let you know that. After you've done that, I've got the wrong menu up here. I don't have the check-in menu. That's my bad. But if you right-click the project and click Check-in, Team Explorer will display like it's showing here. And I've got a comment here, code comment. Do that. Again, future you will thank you. There's other stuff that you can do in TFS and Git, and almost all source control engines have this ability to do something like stripe or label a build. So if you're ready to, say, promote the code to the next level for testing, and especially when you're ready to deploy, you want to put a label on that so that you can come back and find it, right? Because I don't know about y'all. Do you write code? Who writes code that works first? Every time? Perfect. I saw the hands go up and back. Good for you. All right, you did. This guy here says he doesn't. I don't. So sometimes I have to troubleshoot. I'll go pull that version out and then troubleshoot it. Leave yourself a comment, and I usually put something like this in there. You don't have to do it like I do it. Once it's checked in, you get these little locks beside it with TFS and Git as well. So what I'd like to do now, first demo, and it's not earth-shattering, bless you, is and we're going to actually take a look at what it looks like when it's checked in. So I got to do my duplicate thing here, and I'm hoping, yep, you're seeing my presenter mode. Don't steal any of my secrets. What does it look like when it's checked in? If I go to repos here, and I'm going to kind of pull this down and minimize that. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff I need to get out of our way. All right, so if I zoom in here, nope, I zoomed into the wrong thing. That happens. Don't try this at home, kids. I'm a professional. This is the repos. This is SSIS samples as of today. There's my test SSIS solution. You can see I checked it in last on 10/26 last week. And if I zoom into the project, there's my 3 SSIS packages in there and the DT proj file. And I also made a folder for the ISPack file. That's not native. It won't natively store that. I did that so that me and my friend Aaron Nelson, is Aaron, are you here? There he is. Aaron Nelson, SQL variant on Twitter, and a master of PowerShell, a patient master, I might add. Helped me out a great deal with some of the PowerShell stuff that I needed. And we did that so that Aaron could blog about this over at SQLvariant.com, and people could come here and get the ISPack file, because part of what you're doing is deploying ISPack files using PowerShell. Fantastic blog, go read it, Aaron's SQLvariant.com. So we added that. We kind of had to manually put this in here. But that's what it looks like, and that's it. That's my big demo. Like, oh, great, big whoop, Andy. Are all of your demos going to be this earth-shattering? And the answer is, why, yes. Thanks for asking. Let's see if this is going to do what I want it to. And the answer right now, I can tell, is no. So that's okay. I'm good. We can go back here to that one, and we can start again. See what that does. Yeah, perfect. So that's a brief history. And we're going to look now at agents. So you people who were dozing that had done Azure DevOps, but wake on back up just a little touch. Wake up a little bit and hang on here with me. So I chose to use a self-hosted Windows agent for this. I tried the Windows agents that are in Azure, and the runtime, the build time for that agent was running for me around 8 minutes. Now, I live in Farmville, Virginia. I've got 25, count them, 25 megabyte DSL down, and less than a megabyte up. But it was still taking about 8 minutes to run up there. The self-hosted, you're going to see them. They're going to run probably around a minute. It actually runs faster in Farmville for some unknown reason. I was coming in around 30 seconds there. But I will walk you through, again, we're going to do a bunch of slides on how to, screenshots of how to set up the agents and the personal access token and configuring and starting it. Then it's going to get really exciting. So if you want to leave, it's okay. We can still be friends. But if you stick around, you're going to actually see this, the cloud communicating with my little laptop here. And it's a VM on the laptop. And I got to tell you, this just makes me all giggly inside as an engineer. I mean, so let's get started with this. There is a fantastic article that walks you through this, self-hosted Windows agents. This is a screenshot of the web page, self-hosted Windows agents. And it's probably been updated since I took this screenshot last week. They're constantly changing things. But you have to go to some of the linked pages in here to kind of figure it out. It took me, the first time I went through this, it probably took me about 3 passes to get my head around this and to make it go. So if you try it the first time and it doesn't work, try 2 more times. And then if you won't, send me an email and say, Andy, I tried 3 times. I can't figure it out. There's a link there at the bottom if you download the slides, and you can get that. Give the slides a couple days at least. You have to set up a thing called a personal access token, and this is what allows you to securely connect your local agent to the cloud. And this is just security, and it's awesome. I love the way that they've got this set up. One thing about this is the way they described it in that version of the page is not the way you get to it. So you can see I've got the little person icon over there on the left. That was my little image, my cartoon with me and the beard. Just to the left of that is a little person's thing. That's the link you need to click. Now, it looked different when they wrote the article and they showed it the old way. They haven't yet updated it to show it this way. So you have to click that first, and then that personal access tokens will show up underneath that drop down. And that's in the upper right corner, by the way. Once you get to personal access tokens, you click new token like we show here, and you're setting up some security. And I'll zoom in here just a little bit so you can see there's some configurations you need to do. It's got that written down, and all of what it is written down is correct. So there's 2 things they want you to set up: read and manage agent pools, and I think it's read and manage deployment. But for what I'm doing, I'm only using the agent pool part. So I just want to make you aware that it's not just me. They're changing things on. They're changing it on themselves, okay? So and it's got to be hard to keep up with all this. Once you're there, then you can go to the organization settings. So back at the very front page, dev.azure.com, or if you click on Azure DevOps, it'll take you to that page. At the bottom of that left side is organization settings. If you click that, in organization settings, there's a bunch more. It's not going to look like this. I shortened it up. Down about 3/4 of the way down the page, you're going to see pipelines, and then under that, you're going to see agent pools. So if you click that, it'll take you to this agent pools page, and there's 2 set up by default if you've set up any kind of Azure pipelines. There's the Azure pipelines, and then the default. I chose to use the default ones. I actually used the Azure pipelines, but as I said, they were running a little slow for me. They're both set up, even in this project, but I get more performance out of running defaults configured with a local agent. All right. Once you click the default, if this is your very first time clicking this, you're going to see what you see here. There will be an add your first agent, and a new agent button is there. If not, you can see in the upper right-hand corner, you can just click new agent up there. Yep, there it is. So you can click that, and it'll build a brand new default agent for you. This walks you through. There's a kind of a wizard-like couple of settings. And again, there's a download button at the very top here. Let me see if I can zoom in on that. You're going to need to do that, and you're going to need to leave the zip file that is downloaded in the downloads directory. Trust me on this. Just leave it alone. And then there's some PowerShell, and you're going to want to copy and paste this PowerShell. There's a copy button off to the side here. You copy that, run that in PowerShell. There's some more instructions down here on like configure the agent if you want to do that. That was the wrong thing to click. And again, you can look at detailed instructions for this. There is a config.cmd file, and we're going to see that in just a minute, a little more detail. And then later, once you've done that, there is a run file. We're actually going to do this in the demo. We're going to run it. I'm going to show you a screenshot of the config next. And I did this from a command prompt. I straight up, I had some trouble doing this inside of PowerShell. I suspect I had something misconfigured, or I hadn't configured yet. I'd done something dumb. This is why it's good to have a friend like Aaron who's really good at this, because I'll say, hey Aaron, can you fix this? And about half the time he can tell me what to do right away. The other half he's like, I don't know how you've messed this up, Andy. So I'm a really good tester for Aaron in PowerShell, and I'm a noob at PowerShell. When we're done, you can see that first one. I'll go back. That was the beginning of it. It starts prompting you. And I couldn't get it to prompt me for my URL when I ran this in PowerShell. Again, don't know why I was doing that, but it did it. So if I just double-clicked config or opened a command prompt and typed in config, it would run and prompt me. And then when it's done, you can see all the stuff it's asking me for. There's that, the second line there is asking me, how do I want to authenticate? Remember we did personal access token earlier? I didn't show you the screen for that, but that actually pops up a long, weird-looking string. You copy that, and then you paste it in here on that third line, enter the personal access token. And then it begins to connect and kind of register itself with the Azure DevOps server in the cloud. And there's a few more questions that it asks you, but again, all of that is documented in that documentation. I just want to, my goal here, what I'm trying to do, is I want you to realize how this process kind of goes. I don't expect you to remember every little step. And you can download this and you can see how it looked last week. I guarantee it's going to change eventually, and maybe in a couple of weeks, who knows. But just be aware that these are the steps that you take. Once you've got this configured, you can then run it. And when you run it, it does this, and that's exactly what I'm going to do next. I'll run it so you can see it. And again, we've got to play our game. Let's escape out of here. There we go. And I apologize for not being better at this. There we go. And let's pop over to there, and that's the wrong thing. I did that in the wrong order. You can't change screens from inside the VM. So here we go, and there's the VM. So we are now in here, and if I open up I'm just going to open up a command window. It puts me into C, and I'm going to CD to agent. I left the folder. It creates the folder by default. It creates a folder named agent on the C drive, and I just left it in there. There's a few files in there and a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to zoom in so you can watch this go. And when I type run, if I've done everything right, let's see, it'll start listening for jobs here in a couple of seconds. Connected to the server. Yep, there we are. So what's just happened here, like I said, this makes me a little giggly, is my virtual machine has an agent running on it right now, build agent, Azure DevOps build agent, and it's connected to Azure DevOps in the cloud, and it's listening for jobs that may pop out of there. We're going to run a bunch. Is that cool, though? Am I the only one that feels giggly about that? Okay. It's all right if we are. But it's now running, and it's doing its thing. One thing I need to do, I'm going to go ahead and open up Test SSIS Solution, and let's pop out of here and go back and restart this guy. So that did something different, but give me one more minute here. Sorry. You know what I forgot to do? Stop. I forgot to change my screen settings. So let's stop the show. Slideshow, reading material, stop. Okay, let's see if this will work. I wonder if it'll let me do the extend in here and then restart. No. Now restart. Better. But it restarted the whole thing. One more time. Don't try this at home. I've been doing this for years. All right, back down here. Start the agent. Sorry. All right, there. I didn't hold shift when I started. Okay. That's kind of an overview of how the agents go. The next piece in this is pipelines. And I want to kind of pause here anyway and talk to you about the real problem I'm trying to solve. Back in the day, I was an MCSD, Microsoft Certified Solutions Developer, and this was before .NET. I was working with VB, and I made the jump over to data kind of accidentally. Long story, but the short version was that I was working on a team, I was doing reporting, and I finished my part, and the database person was struggling in their role, and the boss calls me in and he says, Andy, you're the only other person on the team that has SQL Server on their resume. Can you take over as kind of like the application DBA? We're not going to fire that guy. We're going to move him off to something he's really good at. He's suffering a little here. And my response was, how hard can it be to tell developers no? I can do that. I was in way over my head. We had a 1.6 terabyte data warehouse on SQL Server 2000. And while that may sound biggish today, and it kind of is, this was 15, 20 years ago. There were no SANs at that time. We had 16 spindles hanging off of a box. And it was interesting. We'll use that word, interesting. I learned a lot. Kaylin Delaney was here talking yesterday. Anybody get to see Kaylin? I went to her talk at the SQL Saturday, at the PASS Summit in 2004. And I learned a lot about tuning and stuff from reading her post back on Usenet. Anybody remember Usenet? It's really old user groups or group, I can't think of the name, but groups on Usenet. And I got in over my head, started tuning this thing. But what I missed right away when I came over is I was just starting to get into test-driven development. I read a book by Kent Beck called Test-Driven Development. Although he was using, I think, Java as his example, I was applying all of those principles to Visual Basic development because one of the reasons was, it really appealed to me as an engineer, right? My degree's in electronics engineering. And when I saw that, I was like, this is kind of cool. And it was also, the very first time I saw it, it was called Fail First Development. And I was like, I've been doing this for decades. I'm way ahead of the time. I fail all the time. Nothing ever works the first time. So it was awesome. I jumped over to data, though, and it was like we didn't have anything like this. And it was a little scary because what I missed was something that Shrija and Liz made a really good point about in our Wednesday talk. And if you're listening to this recording after this, and if you're here listening to this, go listen to that talk because at the very end of it, they made what I think is a really important point. And it's what does DevOps do for you? It gives you confidence, right? Maybe you found a bug and you fixed it. But did you break anything else? That ever happened to any of y'all? I've done that. I've broken something else when I fixed a bug. Yeah. So, but if you've got regression tests, right? You run these tests and you realize they all pass. That doesn't mean you didn't break anything else. It means you didn't break anything that you're aware of that you could have broken. But what happens if you break something new? Well, you write a new test, right? And then from then on, maybe you've got a dozen regression tests, and then you've got 20, and then you've got 50. And you walk away from executing that regression test with confidence. This is going to most likely work when I deploy it to prod. Have you ever deployed something to prod and then it broke and you had to roll it back? That's heartbreaking to me. I've done it. It tears me up. I can't sleep. I can eat, as you can tell, but I can't sleep. It worries me a lot. This is exactly the problem that we're trying to solve here. We want you to have confidence, because what will inevitably happen if you have a boss, I have a boss, if you have a boss, then if you are confident and you're able to communicate that confidence to the boss, then the boss will then have confidence in you. And every now and then, when you have a review or something, if the confidence has gone up, maybe the money will go up. Maybe. I'm not promising you a raise. If you heard that and say, Andy Leonard just promised me a raise, you're wrong. But it can happen. And this is what you want. So Leo Lee, who is on the Azure SSIS team in Shanghai, was here 2 days ago and completely blew my surprise. Did anybody see Leo's talk on this? Okay, good. Then never mind. This is a surprise. It's the one guy raised his hand down here. Leo and Sandy and Grace, they're awesome. And we talk. And they haven't released this, as far as I know. They hadn't released this at the beginning of the week. But there's these 2 new tasks that you see on the bullets here. And this is why you don't have the current version of the slides. I was told you can announce it, but don't announce it till Friday. Add and configure a new build SSIS task. They've made us one. It works with Git. Works with TFS, and a deploy SSIS task. So was it possible to do this prior to these new tasks? Absolutely. Liz and Shrija did it. They did it with Maven and Bitbucket and a whole bunch of manual code. I've got a couple of other friends who, while they've done it, don't want me mentioning their names, but they're enterprise architects, and they've done it by writing a bunch of PowerShell and stuff. It wasn't anywhere near as clean as what you're going to see today. It was hard. And now they've got these 2 tasks, and we're going to see these in action when we get to this. And we're going to, the way we configure this is you go to pipeline. When you want to build a pipeline just in general, you go to pipelines in Azure DevOps. You click new, then you click new build pipeline. Now again, remember early on I said there's other ways to do this. If you're looking at this and you know better ways to do this, fine, just keep your mouth shut. We can talk about it after we get out there. There's people here that have never seen this before. And if you want to help, well, we can all gather out there. And you submit, I'll tell you what, you submit a talk and you tell me how to do it right. I'll come listen to your talk and learn something, because I love learning things. I promise. But this is one way to do it, just to get us going. I'm picking Team Foundation Server version control because that's what my project is in, my Azure DevOps project's in. It asks me again about selecting a source. I've got that here. And then I have to configure the path to my project. Mine is the SSIS samples project. And I click continue. Once I'm done with that, it asks me to select a template. And it's got a bunch of templates on here. This start with an empty job is in the upper corner. And that's what I did. Once I did this, now it's asking me to pick the agent pool that I'm going to use. Remember, I configured default, and we set up a local build agent. That was our last demo. That agent's running, by the way. And it's running locally here on my, on my VM. Once we've got a pipeline created, and this is one view of it, this is the editing view, you can see it has tasks, and then variables is underlined. We're actually on the variables page now. Triggers, options, retention, history. We're going to be focusing on tasks, variables, and triggers. And I like to start with variables because if I've got anything secret or anything that I just don't care to reference by its name, and here you see that very top P-word var, PWD var right there. That one is top secret. And so I just configured that as a variable. It's sensitive, so it's got a little lock icon. I click that. That's my password to my SSIS catalog in the cloud. So to deploy, I need to connect to that. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build it and deploy. My next step is actually figuring out the tasks. And I have to give my agent a name. I actually created a few of these pipeline agent names. You can pick inherit from pipeline out of the agent pool if you've already got that configured to use default like I do, or you can just select it again if you'd like. It's not going to make much difference in this case. And here's the new build task. So when you, if I go back and you see that, that I'm checking this box right here, see that plus? Well, I'm adding now tasks to my run agent. And when I do that, I can go search, and I typed in search in the upper right there, SSIS, and the build and deploy came up. The reason I got access to this is I'm friends with them, and we emailed, and I emailed them, they put me on a list and said, yes, you can access this. This is very soon coming to some sort of preview. Usually they do a private preview like this first, then they do a public preview. And I will share, they thought they'd be done by the time we did this. That's why I asked about presenting this. And they're not. It turns out Microsoft is filled with software developers. And one of two things is true about software development, right? Either all of us, me too, are pathological liars, or software is inherently inestimable. I'm going to go with option 2 because I can't sleep if I lie to you. I click add, and it adds that little agent, the SSIS build task there under the local agent. And then there's my configuration. Well, I'll show you this when we get to the demo. We'll actually pop this open, and you can see the real values in it. I'm just building from the test SSIS Solution project path in SSIS samples. I'm outputting to a built-in variable in Azure DevOps called build.artifact staging directory. That's what you see here. The deploy task is a little more complicated. It's got a few more settings. You will notice, and let me see if I can zoom in here and show you some of these things. Like I have to use that variable for the password. It's down in there, and we'll show you that again when we get to the demo itself. But once you've got that configured, it works, and it will do pretty cool things. So I apologize for having to flip back and forth. That's still on duplicate. That's weird. All right, never mind. And when we get here, you can see my screen. That's what I'm after. I've got this deployed out there, and I want you to see the agent here, and I want you to watch the Azure DevOps. And it's over here. Let me minimize this, minimize it, normalize it. And we're going to go look at the top line here, pipelines. This is the one that is a very generic deploy to test. Now, I'm going to zoom out for a minute. I want you to watch over here when I queue this. So when I click queue, it asks me what do I want to call it. I'm going to just leave it like it is and click run. We're going to see kind of a in progress execution here. And it's really neat. It gives you these little console pictures inside of the web page. See right here? It is running that job, deploy to test. So that's the agent running locally, and we're looking at DevOps in the cloud. Again, this is giggly time for me. And it's building it. And what it's going to do is it's going to write a new version out here. It's actually in the middle of the deployment now. It's finalizing the deployment. If we go look at SSMS and look at the versions here of Test SSIS Project on SVA demo, the window will pop up and it'll show us the versions, and it should show us the latest version just happened. And it did. That's I think that's UTC time. It's not that late, is it? I haven't been talking that long. All right. So it did. So there's our latest version. It actually redeployed that out there. And it tells us here that the job, there it was running it, and then it said a job deployed to test, completed with the result, succeeded. So this is kind of cool. I like this piece. I like being able to do this. But what I really wanted back when I was doing that presentation 12 years ago, what I was really after was something more. I want to be like the Node developers. I want to be like the JavaScript developers. I want it to be like other people doing software development. Remember I said SSIS is software development. I wanted to be able to check in my code and have it automatically fire a build, right? Automatically do this. And this is what really got me excited working with Liz and Srija and their team at Teach for America, which is a really cool not-for-profit, by the way. Is they were doing this, and they had done this kind of the old way. And like so many of us, when we're working in isolation and we're not connected to community people and all that, and I'm picking on y'all a little bit, but it's a good pick, so don't be upset. But they felt, and I could tell when we were talking, they were like, everybody's doing this. And this is like a year ago, and I was like, nobody's doing this. That wasn't exactly true, but it was a very, very small minority of people that were actually doing this, pulling it off successfully. So we started meeting and kind of hanging out. And what I wanted to figure out was how to do, on check-in, I want you to build and deploy and then test. And if the test succeeds, I want you to build and deploy to production and run a test execution out there. Is it all right if I show y'all how to do that? Is that all right? All right. Y'all were doing this way before me. So that's what we're going to do next. And I just want to share with you, and we'll walk through this code quite a bit. This will be a little extensive. But I'm going to show you how to add a test execution. Now, there is a better way to do these tests. I'm not doing it what I'd consider the right way. If you go back and look at the demos that Srija and Liz did, they're creating real test artifacts inside of Azure DevOps. I'm cheating and using PowerShell. So I've got a manual execution that I'm doing, and then I've got a manual test that I run. But I'm doing that more so to show you that I can fail it manually, and I can also succeed it manually. But the key for me is this automation piece. When I check it in, it's going to build, deploy to test, execute it in test, and then it's going to evaluate the test results. And if they succeed, it's going to build and deploy to production, and then do test execution in production. Now, I want to take just a minute to share with you how I'm doing the execution. I'm doing it in PowerShell, but I'm also using a framework. And the SSIS catalog is an SSIS framework. Frameworks manage execution, configuration, and logging. What I did was I took the code. If you've ever executed an SSIS package in the integration services node in SSMS, you can right-click a package and click execute, right? Who's done that? Okay, and you see it calls, at a minimum, it calls 3 stored procs, right? I just wrapped that stored proc into a big stored procedure, and I pass it just a bare minimum of stuff. Now, you may say, Andy, why would you do that? The SSIS catalog does it for you, and it's managed by Microsoft. All of that's true. Here's why. Back before the SSIS catalog came out, I had built frameworks. I was actually hired by Unisys to do this because Informatica has framework functionality built into it. SSIS did not. It could do it, but you had to build your own. And why would I do that? Anybody ever load a flat file and have to archive it, right? I had a package I've been dragging around since before SSIS was released. It was named archive file. It had variables. It allowed you to parameterize it, and it just did it. It would copy it to another directory. It would rename it with a timestamp. It was awesome. I say that, but I'm biased. I wrote it. But it worked. And at Unisys, we ended up using that in various places in about 30 workflows. You can think of them as pipelines. We called them SSIS applications, right? And what I wanted to do is what I had back in the file-based execution days. I had that archive file package in one location. I kept it in source control in one project. If I needed to add functionality to it, I'd check it out, add the functionality, test it, run it all through everything, do my regression tests. It was all manual back then, but I did it, and then redeploy it. It would eventually go to production. If I found a bug in it, same deal, right? Fix the bug. I was talking with some members of the team that built the SSIS catalog back in the 2012 era, and I said, hey, how do I do this? because I was using the execute package task, and the execute package task would execute SSIS from the file. Now, in the catalog, I didn't have that option. I kind of did, but don't do it. You can make it work, but you're jacking it up. And again, if you win the lottery or future you looks at it in 5 years, you're going to be, what was I thinking? Don't do all that. But as talking with them, they said, oh, it's easy. You import archive file into your project, and then you deploy it. And I said, okay. I've got it out there in 30 different projects, and I find a bug. What do I do? Well, you fix the bug, and you re-import it 30 different times and deploy 30 perfectly work. I was like, no, I stopped them. No, that's not going to happen. We're going to do code reuse. And when I scripted the package, when I scripted out the execution, I saw these three calls. And this is actually scripting from a catalog in the cloud. And you end up seeing this. This is what it looks like. But if you put a wrapper around these, you can see there's actually three calls here. Create execution, which creates an intent to execute. Set execution parameter value. This is for the logging level parameter. This configures the intent to execute. And this is a well-known pattern. And you can have multiple steps in that middle here. And then finally, you start the execution, right? All I did was put this wrapper around it called execute catalog package. And this is out there. You can go get it. It's free. It's open source. You can get everything that I'm talking about here. So when I execute this, this is what I'm doing. I add an execute using an SSIS framework, and then I execute from the test. And once I've added these are Azure PowerShell. These are available today. Azure PowerShell tasks, I configure them. And again, we'll look at them. You'll see them a little bit better later. This first one calls an SSIS package in the framework, passes it a parameter that is an application name. What's kind of neat about this is I can run one package like I'm doing here in an SSIS application. I can run 100 or 1,000. I still pass one parameter to this one stored proc, and it just executes the rest of these. The test is similar. I'm running a query that's just going to count some rows. It's going to look for one row that comes back. We'll look at the SSIS package, and you'll understand why it's only looking for one row. If it sees something other than one row, it's going to fail. 0 or 2 are not ready. Also, in this demo, I'm going to talk about enabling triggers on this. So you enable a CI, continuous integration trigger, on the deploy to test step. Then I'm going to configure the deploy to production to execute on a successful deploy to test pipeline. And then I'm going to configure. I made that up. I'm published. I have a license to spell. All right. I'm going to configure a trigger that is going to say, all right, when that's done, then we're going to execute a test execution over in production. So this is how you enable these triggers. You're going to actually see me do this. I'm going to enable continuous integration on that first step, the one that we just ran manually by queuing it. On the second step, I'm going to configure it to build and deploy from source control, and then trigger it on a successful execution of the deploy to test, and then I'm going to trigger it by doing a check-in. I'm going to show you my dream I've been dreaming about for 12 years here. So I hope that's okay. Let's do the switcheroo here on duplicate. There's a lot here. I know that. But this is how I would configure the trigger. So back to pipelines. And I've got these numbered. That 0 is the one that's just set to run. I'm adding the test here. If I click on deploy to test, first adding the tests in PowerShell using the Azure PowerShell. By the way, the way you do that is you click plus, and then just over here, and this is a marketplace plugin right here. I just type Azure PowerShell, and that's the one I'm going to use. I'd click add, and it would put it into here for me. When I click on that, I can then configure one of the options. It doesn't default to this, but you can change it to inline script. Probably better to use a script file path, but I did it this way because it was quick. And this is me creating I've actually got an ADF pipeline called Execute SSIS Framework Parent. The ADF pipeline accepts a parameter called application name. There it is, application name, and a value. So the parameter name value. There is an execute SSIS activity in the pipeline, and it calls the stored procedure. Sorry, that's not right. Yeah, it is right. It actually calls a parent package and passes it that parameter value. That parameter value then goes and starts looping through all of the SSIS packages that are configured in metadata to run. Once it's done with that, I just told it to sleep for 15 milliseconds here, I believe it is. I'm not sure if that's seconds or not. I just want to give it time to get there before I execute it. My next PowerShell piece here is execute the query that counts the number of rows that are in a table. We'll actually go look at that table here in just a minute. And to connect with that, I've got to build a connection string. My password is a PowerShell variable, $PWD, and I read that in from that PWD var. By the way, that's tricky. I don't know if you're watching all that, but $PWD equals quote, dollar, begin paren, PWD var, which is a variable over here. That's how that was configured. That was a couple of days. No, it actually wasn't. Yeah, it was. Beating my head against the monitor, figuring that part out. But I did. And then if it does not equal 1, that's a not equal comparator. If the record count that comes back from the data set does not equal 1, it raises a custom error that says the record count is this many records found at whatever the date was. It could be 0, it could be 2. It'll never be 1 because that's the answer I'm looking for. It'll be equal to 1. Okay. Over on triggers. Enable continuous integration. This is where it starts to get fun. So once I've got that turned on, I save it. And then how do I trigger it? I trigger it with a check-in. Now, this is what gives me one record. I truncate the target table and then I load one record into it, right? So if I disable this, that gives me a change. You see my little red check down here? That's a change. Save the project. Right-click Solution Explorer and click Check-in. Team Explorer is up. And I hit my comment. I disabled, gosh, spell, Andy, spell. Disabled the delete. It's actually a delete statement in there. When I checked that in, the reason I wanted to make sure that was spelled right is a bunch of things happen. So one thing that happens is it may start a new agent here in just a second. It did, a new build agent execution. If I go back to pipelines, and I will see that I've got one running and it's named what my comment was. If I start looking at that, it's checking things in. It's actually building. Now it's deploying. And let's see if it deploys correctly. It should be happy. How am I doing on time? I'm doing okay on time. Okay, wow. I shouldn't be surprised, right? Of course I'm doing okay on time. I'm kidding. But that does its thing. The execution is happening. Now, this should fail the test. Executing the test is pending right here. This should fail it. Anybody use catalog reports built right into SSMS? Anybody got anybody in the enterprise that probably could use access to that information, but they have no business having SSMS on their desktop? One of the things I built is a tool here called Catalog Reports. Is it there? It's not there. Let's go. I didn't start it. That's why it's not there. We'll look at this. And this will take a minute to fire up. But, come on. There we go. All right, while that's firing up, we should see that the test fails when it executes. It's executing right now. And we're going to end up with some red text here. There's our red text. And that's the error. Remember in the PowerShell, I told it if it's not one, tell me how many records it was and tell me when you ran it. And that's, here we are at 8:14 UTC. It found 2 records. Why did it find 2 records? Because there's a delete statement in that execute SQL task that I disabled. So it always deletes all the records in there, and then it puts 1 back. Now there's 2 in there. Okay, it did what I told it to. I was mentioning this catalog report, so I'll come back to that when we enable the rest of the stuff. So this failed, but it failed like I wanted it to. This is a good test. Just because the results, I'm asserting a fail here manually in my mind. When I automate this fully, when this fails, I want to capture that error message, interrogate it, and make sure that it failed the right way. But for a first pass, this isn't bad. The next thing that I want to do inside of my pipelines here is I want to now say, okay, if you succeed, I want you to deploy to production. And how do I want to enable that? On my trigger over here, I want to add a build completion. So remember, it'll fail to build the first pipeline, the number 1 pipeline here. If that fails, because the test fails, it won't ever deploy this. I save and queue this. And finally, if that runs and succeeds, I also want to run a test execution in production that will also just make double sure everything made it to production. This is on a successful deploy to production. So now I'm kind of daisy chaining things together. And what I'm after is when I do the build, I want it to, when I change something and check it in, I want it to build, deploy to test, execute, check the conditions. If that succeeds, build, deploy to production, and then run a test execution in prod. Are we ready to see my dream? It's my dream. All right, here we go. And I'm going to make it succeed this time by enabling this. That also triggers a change that pending changes picks up. Inside of my pending changes, I'm going to have enabled delete. And when I check that in, I'm hoping to see my agent start up over here in just a minute, if it hasn't already. There we go, deploy to test fired. If I go back to my builds, pipeline builds here, on number 1, I should see a new build running, C1 build. If I click that, it shows it to me. If I click the enable delete comment message again, now we see it running through the build activities. And this time it shouldn't fail. It should only find 1 record in that table. It is, right now, it should be executing the package, and it's doing it using the SSIS framework, but again, in my executions here, I should be able to see, either see it running or see it succeeded. And there is write a record and succeed. I think that's the one we just did. If we pop back to deploy, it's executing the test suite now. Let's get over here. I'd love to catch that running. Up there it goes. So I went from 110 to 112. This is my version of the built-in SSMS reports. It's also free and open source out on GitHub. And you can pull this down and make it your own. It's for people who need to see this in production, need to see things running in production, but have no business with SSMS on their machines. You can see, if you were watching, it just started another job over here. It finished deploy to test. It's now doing deploy to prod. This means the deploy to test succeeded. When we go back to pipelines and look, we will see that that is running with the same message. It's finishing now, finalizing. And it should do 1 more execution. This should be the number 3. And this is running. We just see it started the last pipeline. And if we go to catalog reports and refresh, we should see 112 jump shortly. It is running that job. Oh, it's still checking it out. or it'll fail. So that failed. Well, I got 2 out of 3. I'm happy with that. I do have a little bit of time left to answer some questions. If you have any questions, I think I got about 10 minutes left. I'm not going to troubleshoot this, but it looks like something went sideways in the way I had this job configured. I apologize for that, but we did get our 3 triggers on check-in. I deployed to test. I built, deployed to test, executed. A test execution. It did run and it succeeded there. It then triggered another pipeline to deploy a build to production, and it did that, and it failed on an execution in production. So if you had any concerns about me getting it right the first time every time, now you know I don't. And that's the error that it failed on. But before I wrap up here, and like I said, I'd be happy to take your questions. Let me pop back into Extend and run that. And this is kind of me walking through triggering the build. It's always an honor to present. This is a link to learn more about me, andyleonard.blog/learnmore. And if I can be of assistance, I do training and consulting. Andy.leonard@entdna.com. And I would like to thank you for sticking around. Thanks so much.